Mark, what's going on? How are you?
Hey, I'm fantastic. And you?
Man, I can't complain. I'm in Maui. We have a rule whenever my family's in Maui. There's no complaining while in, about, or anything while we're here. So that's our rule.
I
So
understand. It's
you are
good to
in
see
it.
you.
You as well. You're in hot Atlanta. So
I,
how hot?
I
How
am.
hot? How hot is it?
Yeah, it's cooled off this week. It's in the
Okay,
90s, but it was hotter than that the last few weeks.
got it. So you are a leadership expert, let's say. Okay. You have worked in the field of leadership and written many books on the topic. Uh, how did you get into this? What drew you to leadership?
Well, I think what drew me to the topic was the fact that everything rises and falls on leadership. And I'm part of an organization that at the time had leaders scattered all over the country. And we set about how to help them be more effective, how to help them lead at a higher level. And that was a journey I started about 25 years ago. And so it was really out of a desire to help leaders meet their current and emerging needs. And so it was a needs-based mission.
Okay. Nobody starts out being a leader, right? Because we all start out, high school, college, maybe, right? And then working for someone in general, right? Was that your
Sure.
story? Was that your story as well?
Yes. I started in the restaurant business as an hourly team member almost 45 years ago.
Okay.
And I was awful in the restaurant. So I quit. This is not career advice for people, but I felt like it would
I
look better on
disagree.
my.
Hold on. I disagree with you. I think it is career advice. You try shit, you don't like it, you move on.
Maybe it's advice, but here's what happened. I thought to myself, I don't want to get fired and have that on my resume. So I'm managing my resume as a teenager. I say, because this is not working out. So I think I'm going to quit. And so I did, and went and got another job. And 6 months later, I got laid off. And I'm thinking, man, I need a job. And so I went to the corporate headquarters of Chick-Fil-A. That was the restaurant I had worked for as an hourly
Okay.
team member. And I walked in and I told them I wanted a job working in their warehouse because I figured I couldn't work in the restaurant, but maybe I could work at the corporate headquarters, which of course is no reflection on the other professionals at the headquarters. And so I walked in, I'd love a job in your warehouse. They told me to have a seat. And just a few minutes later, the founder of the company came out and took me into his office to conduct the interview. People are going, well, that's crazy. That makes no sense. Well, it doesn't, except that 40 plus years ago, he only had 15 employees. So I was going to be number 16. If you've only got 15 people, the head man or the head woman is probably making those interviews, right? Making those decisions. And so he gave me a job working in the warehouse, in the mailroom at the
Okay.
headquarters. And one thing led to another. And I got to start stuff. I don't think it's because I had a lot of talent necessarily. It was a little bit of let the kid do it, and I'd do anything they asked me to do. And I was just a teenager
Sure.
working in this corporate environment, and I tried to bring a lot of hustle to my work and extra effort. And again, over time, I was given more and additional responsibilities. And 6 months later, I was leading a team, and 43 years later, I've had a chance to do a lot of things.
Do you still work for Chick-fil-A?
I do.
Okay. Can you get them to open on Sunday?
No, but thank you for asking.
I would.
It'll taste better. It'll taste better on Monday if we're closed on Sunday.
That's a great. You've been asked this question a couple of times. So what was that like for you going from? So I have a very similar story. I started as the janitor because I didn't have any money to clean the jiu-jitsu school that I now own, right? And we have, we started with one and now we have 7. So yeah, so yeah, janitor to owner. And so it's possible, right? Like mail boy to leader and owner. So what was that process like for you going from this worker, right? Because that's what you were, right? To this leader, because they're totally different tasks, right? Like, and they're totally different skill sets. And that's where people really get hung up, right? It's like, it's a really big shift.
Yeah, it's a different career trajectory. And
Mhm.
as you said so well, it's a different skill set. But I just said I'll learn, and I'm still learning all
Mhm.
these decades later. I think the best leaders have a commitment to lifelong learning. That's what enables them to lead well into the future.
And you've written some books on the topic. What books have you written?
Well, again, I've written several. The backstory on that is we try to figure out what are the current and near-term needs of our leaders. And then I usually put a team together of smart people. We try to figure out a point of view, and then we codify it and write books and distribute those. The very first one
So
was,
you write books based on the team, your company's team needs.
well, it's yes, and we think the needs of leadership are generally universal. Like right now, I'm working on a book on culture. Yes, that will serve the leaders in our organization, but that's going to serve leaders around the world.
For
I
sure.
think in full credit to our executive committee 25 years ago, I was approached by a guy named Ken Blanchard. I don't know if your audience will know him or not. He's the only guy who had 3 books on the New York Times bestseller list at one time in history. And his most famous book is The 1 Minute Manager. Again, 30 years ago. So Ken approached me about writing a book on the work we were doing, and that became the first book. It's called The Secret. But I think in credit to our executive committee, when I went to them with this crazy idea, Ken Blanchard wants us to do a book, they said, hey, maybe it'll serve the world. And so we did it, and none of us knew that book's now in 25 languages. Not because it's necessarily a great book, but it's chock full of truth, and truth sells in any culture and in
Sure.
any language.
Sure.
And so that first one was about the fundamentals of leadership. I've done books on teams. I've done books on engagement. I've done books on execution, just the things that leaders work on and the things that they have to be concerned about. And so, again, a culture book currently. My last book was on leadership effectiveness. It came out 6 months ago or so, and we stumbled on. I say stumbled upon. We try to be as thoughtful and strategic as possible, but we're just always looking, and we stumbled upon the fact that more and more leaders appeared to be struggling. This was pre-pandemic, and we said, I think it's getting harder to lead. And so we said, hey, what if we could do something to help leaders be more effective? And that became the book Smart Leadership.
Why do you think it's become harder to lead?
I think there are a lot of factors, and that was the path we began to chase initially. Is our premise valid, and if so, why? And we said there's complexity, there's busyness, there's distractions, and we've got a long list of things that we kind of lumped together in this bucket called Quicksand. And we said, nobody goes there on purpose, but once you get in it, based on all the accounts I've been able to read, I've not personally been in it, people say you can feel helpless, you can feel lonely, and, you can feel isolated, and and so, okay, a lot of leaders are like that right now. And so we said, okay, let's explore this. And I took that list with a few other things, and I started talking to leaders. And the very first leader I talked to said, yeah, I hear all that, the busyness, the distractions, the complexity. He said, but that's not my problem. I said, okay, is there anything impeding your effectiveness as a leader? He said, oh, yeah, it's just a different list. I said, what's on your list? And he said, fear, fatigue, aimlessness. I mean, people are giving. I said, okay, what do we do with that? We just put it all in the same bucket. It's still quicksand. It's just everybody's bucket is different. And as I mentioned to you before we went on the air, I don't think the pandemic created quicksand. As you said, it made it quicker, right? It made the whole thing worse, but it's still quicksand, and it's still impeding our effectiveness as leaders. And so what we discovered is once you're in it, you've only got 3 options. The first is just swim in it, which is what most leaders are trying to do. Unfortunately, you're never going to win a gold medal swimming in quicksand, and it's exhausting, and it's really not sustainable. You hear a lot about the great resignation, and some people are putting a very positive spin on it, that people have found a higher purpose and a higher calling. And I have no doubt that some might be in that category. Some of them are just exhausted.
Mhm.
Exhausted. And so they go to that second category. Those that don't swim in it, they just sink. They just give up. They just give in. And they don't physically die, but their hopes and their dreams and their aspirations are extinguished. They just can't do it anymore. And so the only other option that we could discover, if you're not going to swim in it and you're not going to sink in it, you got to escape. And so that's the work that we did. We went to work trying to figure out who are the leaders that seem to have developed the ability to get out and stay out of quicksand.
I want to say, and you tell me if you disagree here. I think a lot of like these leadership principles also can go towards the personal principles, right? Like I think a lot of people are just in the quicksand of their life, you know.
Absolutely.
And the pandemic,
Absolutely.
and again, the pandemic didn't create it, but it put it on hyperdrive and showed them like, yo, like this is not what I want, you know.
Right.
And I'm sinking in my own life.
And I would argue that this content is really about self-leadership, and everybody needs self-leadership, whether you're leading other people or not. So I think we're saying the same thing.
I was just about to ask you the question. Do you think you can separate leadership development from personal development?
I don't know that you would want to. I think leadership development is a facet of personal development. And if you're not leading people, your personal development would probably look different, right? You'd need different skills, as we referenced earlier, if you're going to lead people. But no, I think the most satisfied and fulfilled humans I know are those that continue to learn and grow. Oh, and those also happen to be the most effective leaders, those that keep learning and growing.
I only ask you because you're not 100, like you said you were offline, but you are older than me, and I haven't been able to separate it yet. Like when I'm like, Elliot, let's be a better leader. Generally, when I start looking at the skills or the things that I need to do, it has very little to do with other people and everything in ways that I have to grow.
Yeah, you got to look in the mirror first.
Okay.
Now, you do need to, be sure the people around you are the right people around you, and be sure they have the right skills. But I always encourage leaders, look in the mirror first.
Oh, I feel a sneeze coming on. Sorry. Oh, excuse me. Sorry. What do you feel are some of the things that you discovered while writing the book? How do you get out of the quicksand?
Okay, I'll give it to you at a really high level, and then if you want to chase it, we'll chase anything you want to chase here. Well, first of all, I think the good news is the way to get out is not contingent on skills or IQ or personality or income or disposable, none of that. It's all about your choices. It's about your choices. And what we say is that smart leaders make smart choices. A smart choice is one that takes a little more time, energy, and effort, but yields a disproportionate return. Think of it like you've heard of the concept of keystone habits, a good habit that creates a positive ripple effect. Well, these are good choices that create a positive ripple effect, and there are 4 of them. The first one is that smart leaders choose to confront reality. It's only when you're grounded in truth can you lead from a position of strength. There are so many leaders that for any number of reasons are unwilling or unable to confront reality. That's the first choice. Now, let me say this.
Go ahead.
Yeah, you sure can. Sure
go
can.
Ahead.
Go.
You go.
Well, what I was going to say is there are 4 choices, but this is first among equals. This isn't intended to be a checklist, do this, and this, because you're going to make all these choices all the time. But this is the first among equal. I never met a good leader. I've never even met, no good leader who's unwilling to confront reality.
So my question back to you is in this day and age, right, where the quicksand seems to be like, part of the quicksand seems to be like the disagreement of reality. How do you help the leader, right? Like, I mean, I mean, most people know my political stance on this podcast. I try not to go, nah, I don't know about my dislike of, let's say, for example, Trump. Okay. The man said, for example, and I don't want to get political here, but we're all doing this. This is just the easiest low-hanging fruit. That he had the biggest inauguration ever. A lot of people are doing this in their lives, right? It's not just him. Like this is an effect of what's going on in the world, like where you can literally just count numbers, or on the other side of the spectrum, the mask has saved all of the lives, right? Like, and we know that's not true either, right? So you can take both political spectrums here, which is where we're living, and go, oh my God, neither one of you is right here. But people are so hardened and fastened in their reality. How do you deal with this as a leader?
Okay, so
and not Trump or the crazy left, right? I'm not.
No, I got that.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. I got it. I don't know that it's possible to truly confront reality alone.
Okay.
So one of the strategies that I often recommend is that if you as an individual leader want to be grounded in truth so that you can lead from a position of strength, so you got to want that. You got to choose that first.
Okay.
There's some integrity in there, right? For you.
Yeah, for sure.
You need to find fresh eyes. You find fresh eyes. Now, a lot of ways to do that. I'll give you just a few. One, you can create a personal board of directors. Two, you can hire consultants. You can hire coaches. You can create a peer group. I've got a group of guys that I've been meeting with for 23 years. We meet twice a month studying leadership. They're truth tellers in my world. We create our annual development plans. We share the draft with that group so they can give us critique. And they can say, hey, what about this? What about that? You said last year you're going to do X, Y, Z. Did you finish that? Why isn't that in here? Hey, I think there's something you're missing. So again, is it a coach? Is it a consultant? Is it a personal board of directors? Is it a peer group? There are any number of ways that you can bring fresh eyes into your life, because I think it's impossible for us to fully see the truth ourselves.
We're biased.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
They call them blind spots for a reason.
Yeah, for sure.
They call them blinds. Yeah.
That was a great answer. And I didn't mean to get political on you there. It's just the easiest.
No, I understand your point.
Yeah.
But again, and but see, here's what I would say. People, independent of their political views, if you're not grounded in truth, you're not leading from a position of strength. That's what confronting reality is about. Doesn't mean reality is always going to be warm and fuzzy. Then it may not be something you even like.
You
can't lead from a position of strength if you don't know what's true.
You might be wrong about the reality and then have to switch, right? Which happens to us all the time as leaders, right? Like a massive point is to be able to pivot, be like, yo, shit, I was way wrong over here. The reality says something different. So I gotta move. I think, I mean, slightly linking it back to politics, I think that's our biggest problem with politics, right? Is like whatever they say first, they are unwilling to pivot when the evidence shows that they are completely wrong, So I think because we have poor, from your perspective, most likely poor leaders. So moving on to the next thing. So what was one of the next four pillars?
Okay. Go ahead. The second choice is smart leaders choose to grow capacity. Now, this seems counterintuitive to men and women in quicksand. Sometimes they're going, whoa, if I had capacity, I wouldn't be in this quicksand. Well, there are a lot of ways that you can grow capacity. And the best leaders, they're always working to create enough capacity to meet the demands of today and tomorrow, right? You're responsible for the future. You're just not responsible for today if you're leading. And so you can work on your personal energy and fitness and well-being. That's a way to grow capacity. You can work on your structure. You can work on your calendar. For everything you take off your calendar, you just created some capacity, right?
Can you explain capacity? Can you break down that word and what you mean by capacity for the listener?
Yeah, what I mean by capacity is that you have enough wherewithal to meet the demands of reality. Like, do you have enough time? Do you have enough energy? I know of leaders who actually know how to lead in their head, but they don't have enough energy. They're just exhausted. So what are you doing to grow your capacity and your energy? Are you getting enough sleep? Are you drinking enough water? Some of that's real pedestrian, but we can manage our energy that way, right?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Your capacity in an organizational context, structure should lift and support and enable. So I tell leaders, if you're under a sustained period of stress and pressure, you may not have the right structure, because that's supposed to lift, right? That's what structure's for. And so sometimes leaders that don't have enough capacity, it's like, well, because somebody else ought to be doing that. Another very pragmatic thing is a lot of leaders get caught up in doing the work of their team members and their employees. And it's like, it's never your job to do their job, because then you don't have time to do your job. Right? So all of these things that you need to do to be sure that you've got the mental bandwidth, the physical bandwidth, the emotional bandwidth to actually meet the demands of reality.
Yeah, I think that's and I think the choices and the capacity line up with each other a lot, right? Like, because when you start making bad choices and not dealing with reality, it overloads your system, and you can't handle the capacity of what has to be done.
Right. So let me give you one more, and this will be probably the most crazy thing I'll say during our time together.
All right,
and it's under this whole banner. It's under this banner of grow capacity. What we found in our research is the best leaders for literally thousands of years have created margin in their life. And again, somebody in Quicksand, you start talking about margin, you might as well be saying to a drowning man, I've got a coupon for swimming lessons. And they're going, I don't need swimming lessons. It's like, you got to be kidding me about margin. I said, well, hang on. If you don't have some margin, then you won't ever figure out how to get out of the quicksand.
I'm going to ask you to explain margin again.
Okay, margin in this case is, let me say this. The last time I talked about this to somebody, they said, hey, I don't have time for a vacation. And I said, fine. I'm talking about margin as a leadership discipline. I said, when do you proactively have time set aside to reflect, to assess, to think, to create, and to plan? And the guy didn't say, he didn't have anything to say, because he didn't have any time to reflect, to assess, to think, to create, and to plan. I said, if you're not doing that as the leader, who on your team is doing that? Oh, and by the way, it's not their job. Now, you may have other leaders that should be doing that, but if you're not role modeling that, they're probably not doing that. They just finished a 12-year study. Harvard did this, a 12-year study of CEOs. They actually got these men and women to share their calendars for 12 years. And they found that they spend on average 28% of their time every week alone, their work week. And somebody said, what do you think they're doing? I said, reflect, assess, think, create, and plan. Now, I don't know what I don't think there is a magic number. Your number, my number, everybody's number is different. But here's what I would tell you. The bigger your dreams, the bigger your goals, the bigger your responsibilities, the bigger your challenges, the more time you need in margin. You've got to have time set aside, which, by the way, is why you've got to manage your calendar, manage your energy, and create the right structure. Because if you don't have that time, you can't lead well.
It's so interesting that you say that, because, and I like when I listen and I talk to people, it makes me think about my life, like what do I do, right? Like, and for me, that's what like this time on island is like. When I come to Maui, is I get this really great reflection time. And I came up with 2 businesses in the ocean here, right? Like just like floating around like by myself. I can't have anybody else out there with me, right? And I'm just like in the ocean for an hour, just like bouncing around. And I'm like, oh man, I should really do this with my life. And I can
Yeah.
remember coming back being like, and like making the charge at that. And I'm still in that charge, but it happened here in this reflection time, and taking little short trips, like where I was just talking to someone. I do nothing sometimes. Like we in April, we went somewhere. It was the first time we actually did it post-pandemic, where we went to somewhere. We did nothing as a family. We sat in the condo that we stayed at and we watched the NBA playoffs. And now look, we could have done it at home, but I just wouldn't do it at home because there's so much stuff to do.
Yeah. And again, that's fantastic. And I would say yes, yes, yes to everything you said. But I would also encourage leaders, don't think that you've got to go away, because these CEOs are spending 28% of every working week alone.
That's a lot. Right. Okay.
Reflecting, assessing, thinking, creating, and planning. I mean, what you're talking about is certainly life-giving, and I applaud that. But again, I think of this as a leadership discipline that will grow your capacity.
You're saying in your work week, you need to find
in your work week.
You need to find the time in the margins.
Yes. Now, again, it may not be 28%, but I did talk to a guy who became president of a multi-billion-dollar company, real talented and gifted guy. And I said, well, tell me about that. And he said the first thing he did was he doubled the amount of alone time that he had on his calendar. When his responsibilities went up 100x, first thing he said is, I got to have more alone time to reflect, to assess, to think, to create, and to plan.
And that's not,
he's got more responsibility.
That's not with family and not like sitting on.
No. This is in wherever you want it to be, right? It could be at your office, it could be in your home, be in your car, be in the driveway, it could be at the beach. It doesn't mean it can't be the beach, but it's a leadership discipline. Again, I know particularly when we're talking about quicksand, for a lot of people, it's like you've lost your mind. I said, well, again, I don't know how you're going to get out of your quicksand if you don't carve out some time to reflect, to assess, to think, to create, and to plan. And by the way, once you're out of the quicksand, then there are other things that you can reflect, assess, think, create, and plan around. What are your biggest problems? What are your biggest opportunities? What are your biggest challenges? What are the things that you can't solve while you're in the shower?
Right.
If you can solve them in the shower, they're not that big a problem anyway, right? What are the things that are going to require your very best thinking?
That's the second really gem that I've heard in the last month or so. The first one was if money can solve your problem, you don't have a problem. And now the second one is if you can solve it in the shower, you don't have a problem.
Well, you might have a problem, but it's not huge.
Right. It's not a big problem.
Where you're gonna have to carve out a day a week to think about it.
Right. No, for sure. This is what you hear often from not to date you again, from your aged leaders a lot these days. Man, these kids these days, they just don't know how to work like I used to work. These millennials, these Gen Zers, all they care about is, are they following their passion and their pronouns and all these things that you and I personally might agree with or not agree with, right? But like, how do you deal with this new generation?
Well, I'm excited about the new generation. I think they're the most energetic. I don't know. I'm thinking of the other adjectives that I might use. They want to change the world, at least the ones I'm talking to. And I've seen some research that says they actually want to have a bigger impact on the world than any previous generation. Well, I love that. I love their energy. I love their fresh ideas. Now, the fact that they may approach work differently, I'm okay with that. I think my generation has got to be open to the fact that, previous generations had to adjust to previous generations. So we act like this is brand new. I think we leverage their talents, their gifts, their energy, the fact that they're digital natives and they think differently. I think that's fantastic, personally. But I think here's my last thought on that, because I'm not an expert, but I'm a guy who's been navigating this as my career has progressed and more young people have come into it. I think there's a real risk of treating that group as a cohort. I think you have to treat them as individuals. See, managers want to treat everybody the same. And what are the rules? Leaders have always wanted to treat people as individuals. I think that's more important now than ever. Is what are this person's hopes and dreams? What are their aspirations? What are their fears? What are their concerns? And not what does this generation believe?
Right, and that's happening a lot, right? We're pigeonholing everyone, just like I earlier pigeonholed the left and the right both, right? Like we really like to give these this is how this person thinks and sees it, and that might not be correct at all. And that's really hard as a leader, right?
Yes, and it actually might be true in the aggregate,
right?
But people don't live in the aggregate, right?
Sure.
If you put 1 foot in boiling water and 1 foot in ice water, on average, you're fine. But you got 1 foot in boiling water and 1 foot in freezing water. It's like, no, you're still on average, you're fine. That's
sure, but neither one of them is fine. Neither foot is okay.
Exactly. But on average, you're great.
Right. So that's a really it's another gem that I'm gonna steal from you. Sorry.
Please do.
Because everyone talks about that, right? Like we have to find the average or the middle, and you're great. You're not okay.
There is no middle.
Right.
There is no middle.
Sure.
Everybody's unique.
Everyone's unique.
Which is a real pain for leaders.
Yeah.
It's a real pain. But it's part of the job. If you've got 8 people on your team, 10 people on your team, 100 people in your organization, 1,000 people, they're all individuals.
Right. And treating them as so, even though they might be categorized as, okay, these are my managers, these are my frontline workers, these are my drivers. They're not all the same. They're
not the same.
Needs. Yeah, they have different needs and different wants.
Even if they're all the same age, even if they all went, the same level of education, they're still different.
They're still different. That's a great point. And trying to realize that and get through that is probably one of the hardest things with leadership. Did we go over all 4? I know we had.
No, I'll do the last 2 really quick. The first is to confront reality.
Yep.
The second is to grow capacity. The third is to fuel curiosity. Fuel curiosity.
Okay.
People have asked me on and off for a long time, is there a leadership fountain of youth? And what I used to say is, I hope so, because I'm looking for it myself. Well, now I say, absolutely, there is a leadership fountain of youth, and it's curiosity. It's how we maintain relevance and vitality in a changing world. I just started on TikTok, man. I might be the oldest guy out there on TikTok. Well, why am I doing that? Because there are people out there that need some of what I might be able to help them with, right? Do I want to do that? Well, I want to serve those leaders. So I'm going to go where they are. I'm not going to expect them to find me.
I just started on TikTok too.
See there? I'm not as far behind as I thought.
I hate TikTok. I hate TikTok, man.
Yeah, but you're not doing it for you. I mean, if you're doing it for you, turn it off. Right. I'm doing it for them.
Right.
I'm doing it for them.
Right.
So if there's no other way to maintain relevance and vitality other than curiosity. And the best leaders have always been lifelong learners. And we found these men and women who get out and stay out of the quicksand. They are the curious ones. They are the curious ones. And so, again, lots of strategies and tactics for how to do that.
Of course.
That's the third. And then
the fourth.
You want to go right to the fourth?
Yeah, please.
The fourth choice is you have to choose to create change. Now, this may feel weird. Like, why is that on the list? Well, because there are people who actually make those first 3 choices and they're lousy, ineffectual leaders because they don't want to pull the trigger and make changes. Right? Progress is always preceded by change. And you have to be ready, willing, and able to create change. You want to be grounded in reality and you want to have adequate capacity, and you need to have lots of ideas that you've chinned up based on your curiosity, but you have to be willing to make change. Hope is not a strategy. And if you want to be effective as a leader, you got to be willing to change stuff.
And a lot of people are scared to change, though, and your team gets scared to change that you're trying to lead. So how do you balance the two, right? Because change could feel like, ah, man, he wants to change things. I'm going to get fired. I'm going to make less money. I'm going to blah, blah, blah. There's going to be somebody that's going to come take my job and do it better. So how do you balance the change with because, for people to work well, they have to feel safe.
Yeah, I don't know. Well, I don't have an easy answer. I mean, you just articulated extremely well the tension, but some leaders look at change as a burden or as an inconvenience or as a nuisance. Change is the leader's job. It's the essence of leadership. It's moving people and organizations from here to there, and progress is always preceded by change. Now, I had a CEO tell me, I had a CEO tell me just recently, said, well, that sounds hard. And I said, you signed up for a hard job. If you don't want a hard job, you don't need to be a leader. There are a lot of jobs that are easier than being a leader.
For sure.
And everybody's not going to be happy all the time. You got to get comfortable with that.
Yeah. Let me ask you this, because look, when you take two leaders, for example, right? We use a software called Traction, okay? Or EOS, right? Entrepreneurial Operating System. And they have the ideas
I've heard of it.
They have the ideas of a visionary and an integrator, right? Rather than like a CEO and a COO. But like the CEO is the visionary and the COO is the integrator. These are two different types of leaders, right? The CEO is very visionary, forward thinking, creating things. The COO, their job is to make shit happen, right? So less visionary, right? More integrate, make operator, make it happen.
Execute.
Execute. How do you balance those two leaders things, right? Or just like the two different types of personalities when you're being a leader, because the visionary can be a pain in the ass sometimes, right? Like, because he's always coming up with these grand new ideas, and you have the operator, the executor over there going like, dude, we're just trying to do this, like stop throwing this shit out there.
So here, a couple thoughts. I think what you described is real. No question, no debate. It's not a tension to eliminate, it's a tension to manage. Because if you stay in operating mode, you'll forfeit the future. If you live in the future, you'll forfeit today. So it's a tension to be managed. And again, depending on the size of the organization, most organizations of size, of modest size, they generally build a leadership team. Right. Many of our restaurant operators have leadership teams because they're the structure I mentioned earlier. It helps create capacity, but it also brings diverse opinions and perspectives to a table. The concept of synergy is at play. We can actually accomplish more together than we can individually, but it's a tension to be managed. And again, everybody's not going to be happy with anything you do, right? You got 100 people and you come up with 100 different things you can do. In every one of those scenarios, somebody's not going to be happy. Happiness is not really the primary goal.
Right.
It's just not. Now, last thought on that. People generally want certainty, and leaders can rarely provide certainty. What we can provide is clarity, and they'll settle for clarity. They want certainty.
We want certainty.
I was asked,
but there's no certainty. You have no certainty in your life, though. So,
well, but again, people will test you for it.
Yeah.
And as a leader, if you give it to them, you're putting your leadership in jeopardy. I remember one time, this was earlier in my career, but I'll never forget it. I had overstepped what I knew. I could have provided clarity, and I made some statements that were in the form of certainty, and it didn't happen. It didn't come to fruition. I had a team member come to me and said, "You're a liar." All I could do was apologize. I was wrong. I overstepped. I gave you a degree of confidence. I offered you certainty that I was in no position to offer. And I apologize. And I'll work hard to rebuild your trust and to reestablish my integrity. It's like, give people clarity, not certainty. Here's what you can be certain of. You can be certain on your intent and the level of effort. I don't know what beyond that you can be certain of, because there's so much we don't control. There's so much we don't control.
Man.
So the change part is hard. I don't want to make it sound easy, but there are a lot of leaders that will not throw their hat in that ring and try to create change, which is, it's the fourth choice for a reason. You actually have to create change if you're going to create a better future.
I really like what you said there for a second. And it goes back to each situation is individual. It's not like as a whole. When you said, I will try to reestablish my integrity. And like, when you say that, it almost sounds like you're saying that you are disingenuous, right? In a way, but you're not as a whole. As a whole, you're not. But in this individual case, you were, right? And that can exist, right? That can be true. So with this person, you need to reestablish integrity. As a whole, you're very integrous and upstanding, but you realize the dichotomy there, and that can exist. And I think of all the things you said right there, of all the things you said today, I think pointing out that both can exist in the same place can really help people, because we get stuck in these absolutes a lot, right? And I think this is what we were talking about earlier. I have integrity. Well, yeah, for sure, but not there. And then that also doesn't mean that you don't have it as a whole, right? Like being somebody with integrity means that you realize, like, when integrity is one of your core values, let's say, you realize that you broke it, and now you have to work to fix it. I thought, man, Mark, I thought that was maybe the best thing you said today with well, just because everyone thinks like, oh, when you're a leader, you're perfect. Oh, when you're a leader, you're up on this pedestal, right? And sure, people put us there. And I had a coach once tell me, like, man, if somebody has you up on a pedestal, when you fall off that thing, there's only one place for you to go. And it's not off the pedestal, it's all the way down into the pit. So
yeah. So those are the choices. We like to say that those are a leader's superpowers.
Right. Man, that word just leads right into my next question.
Okay, good.
These are the only two scripted things that I ask. And the first one is this: I believe everyone has a superpower, something that they go out and give to the world, and then the world then gives them back. They get so much from it. It balances our altruism and our narcissism. What do you think your superpower is?
I think it's the ability to make choices.
Okay.
I actually think it's a superpower that every leader, I would even say every human, has that same superpower. Now, I know there are exceptions, and I actually talk about this in the book. I have been to a lot of places in the world where some of the choices that you and I have, the people in some of these developing countries, they don't have those choices, and I got that. But the folks that are listening to this podcast, they may think their superpower is cooking or baking or oratory skills. And okay, yeah. But the one that's above those is their ability to make choices. Okay.
Last question here. So you run a very high power organization. You do big things, Chick-Fil-A, all kinds of stuff, right? This podcast isn't really going to do much for you as far as like moving the needle of any one restaurant or your personal needle or anything like that. Why'd you say yes? Why'd you come on? I think we even had to reschedule once. So why waste your time?
Yeah, well, I don't see it as a waste of time because I feel like I'm on the planet to encourage and equip leaders, and I'm going to take every opportunity. And I think some of the men and women listening to this podcast that maybe, hopefully, I said something today that would serve them. So
How
it's
do
not
you
about moving my needle. It's about moving their needle.
how do you say no to things then? Because you have to say no to some things.
Well, I do, and it's an ongoing battle, right? I mean, I'm trying to grow my capacity, and one of the
Mhm.
things that I have to guard is my calendar. But there are a lot of things that aren't actually going to serve leaders. Those are the first to go. I mean, they don't even make it onto the calendar generally. So that's
Mhm.
one of my filters. And then some of it is scheduling. I mean, I schedule stuff 6 months, 9 months, a year, 18, 24 months in advance to get it on my calendar. And I'm glad we were able to reschedule this. But
Yeah.
had we not gotten it done today, it might be 6 months before we could put it back in there. So it's a very full, very strategic calendar, but it revolves around serving leaders.
Mark,
That's why I'm here.
yeah, I appreciate it. Thanks for coming on. Tell everyone about the book that came out. I actually just started it when I went on the plane out here. So
Okay. Yeah,
yeah.
it's called Smart Leadership, and it covers the choices that we reviewed today at a high level. But I think the value for folks, because I hope the choices are self-explanatory, but here's the deal. You have to activate the choices. You've actually got to make good on the choices. Like you're not going to confront reality without figuring out how to do that. So you have ideas like fresh eyes and other things. So the book's full of tactics that I trust would serve leaders. And then I've got an assessment, a free assessment. If somebody wants to know how am I doing in this
Mhm.
smart leadership world, all they have to do is text 66866. They text "Be Smart," no space, "Be
Okay.
Smart," 66866. It's a free download. And one thing about this particular assessment, we built it so that it gives you prescriptions on things you might try based on how you scored to help you be more effective in the future. So I offer that. My last thought, some people are going to have questions. So my cell number is 678 612 8441. 678-612-8441. And I'll be happy to try and answer your questions.
You're for real. You're for real. You just gave out your cell phone on a podcast that anybody could text with any bullshit.
That is correct.
That's for real. All right. No one, I have never seen anyone give out their cell phone on a podcast before. That was amazing. That might be better than the other thing you did. You have GOAT status, Mark. You just gave out your personal cell phone to people that have questions from this. That was amazing, man.
All right.
There it is. So guys, that's it. Mark, thank you very much for coming on. I know we
It's a
talked a lot
pleasure.
I know we talked a lot about business leadership, but I think one of the things that we said early on the podcast, both Mark and I agreed with, you can't undo the personal from the business. You know, they're very hard. So so find a nugget that can help you do you better as well. So as always, everyone, don't go out in the world and try to be Mark. Mark has his unique power. Don't go out in the world and try to be me. I have my unique thing that makes me do Elliot. Go out in the world, everyone, and please find your own power.